in, Lord. Revive us again. Over and over again. Revive me, Lord. Over and over again. Because like in so many ways, in so many areas of our lives and my life, we've got peaks and valleys. We've got good days, we've got bad days, we've got easy days, we've got hard days. Revive us, Lord. Help us to seek you constantly. Help us to devote ourselves to you wholeheartedly, Father. Help us to commit ourselves unto you entirely. Revive us again. Well, I'd like us to take a look at a passage in the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis, chapter 6, and in that chapter we find the fall of man. In that chapter we find the story of Noah, the beginning of the story of Noah. And we learn there that Noah was a righteous man. We learn there that Noah walked with God. And we also read about Noah's dad, his father, Lamech. And Lamech certainly had aspirations for his son, just like any other dad would. But we read there that Noah walked with God, that he led a life of faith, a life that was righteous, that was pleasing to God. You see, to Noah, his life of faith was more than just talk. You see, you and I stand at the same crossroads that Noah stood at when it comes to our theology, when it comes to our knowledge of God, when it comes to our knowledge of the Word of God, when it comes to our understanding of the will of God, we stand at the same crossroad. We've got to make the same decision that Noah made when it comes to his relationship with God. Will it be all talk? You know, I know all the right answers. I know all the right Bible verses. I know all about Christianity. Yes, sirree. God is love and God doesn't hate anybody. And you know how it is. And you go on. And they know more about how we should live our lives as Christians than maybe we even do. Kind of reminds me of, I don't know, teenagers and those 20-something kids that haven't married yet or don't have children yet. They know more about raising children than parents do who have had kids and they've already been in college and so forth, you know. They know more. Well, it's like that. It's like that today in our world when it comes to living out the Christian faith. A lot of people, they're not Christians, yet they know more. They watch us and they know more about, you know, Bible verses and do's and don'ts and rights and wrongs than maybe Christians do. But they're missing something because it's all talk. They're robbing themselves of something because it's all just head knowledge. Head knowledge. You see, that's a decision that you and I have got to make. It's the same one that Noah made. Will our relationship with God, you see, we're created in His image, and He created us for a relationship with Him. So great is His love for us. He wants our relationship with Him to go far beyond just something that we talk about. Like maybe we would talk about last night's Yankees ball game scores. God has more in store for you and me. That our theology, that our knowledge of God and His Word and His will and His ways and how He is and how He works and how He treats people, you know, it would go much further than just talk. He wants it to be the way we live, how we walk in life, how we journey through life, that our relationship with God goes far beyond just talking Christianese, but that we're actually walking with God through a personal relationship with Him. How does that happen? Well, if I'm walking away from God, I've got my back on Him, I've got to turn away. I've got to turn away from my sinful ways. I've turned my back on God. I'm walking in sin. I'm walking living a godless life. I've got to turn around. I've got to do a 180, and I've got to take a hold of the hand of God and say, "Be my Lord, forgive my sins, and direct my steps." And so we walk with God. We read His Word. We come to know God. We walk with Him through this life, and one day He is going to lead us into heaven because of our faith, our personal faith in Jesus Christ. And so that's the decision that we have to make. That's the crossroad that Noah stood at, and that's the same one that we stand at today. That we would walk with God just as Noah walked with God. Now, I mentioned to you Noah's father, Lamech, Noah's dad. And certainly Noah's dad had all these aspirations for Noah when he was born. And in our house today, we're excited. We're in about 8 weeks, we're going to be grandparents at our house. Maya is going to be a mom, and Tim's going to be a dad. And I know dads, and Lamech, you know, he's certainly no different. He had all these great things in mind for Noah. And I wonder if maybe Lamech, if he said some things or maybe avoided saying some of the things, you know. And I wonder if one day maybe Tim, he's going to be a dad in about 8 weeks. I wonder if there's some things that maybe we'll never hear Tim say. "Oh, Zoe, we're lost. Let's pull over and ask for directions." No, right? Guys, just don't do that. We have problems with that. We sure do. Or maybe, I don't know, I wonder, you know, maybe you'll hear, I doubt it, maybe, I don't think dads say this, "You know, Pumpkin, you're about to be 13. I think you're old enough now to go on unchaperoned dates." No, we'll never say that, right? We'll never say that. Or, "Oh, sweetie, my little girl, I see how all your friends are so violent and, you know, so hostile. I really like that about them." Or, "Sweetie, here's the credit card. Here's my car keys. Go crazy." We'll never hear it. We'll never hear it. Or maybe in their household, "What do you mean you don't want to play the clarinet? The trumpet's not good enough for you or what?" I don't know. And I tell you, I know this isn't Father's Day, so don't get off thinking this is a Father's Day message. That's next week. That's next Sunday. That's next weekend. You know. But here's another thing I doubt that dads will ever say, that Tim will ever say. "Hey, Zoe, you know, your mom and I were going away for the weekend. Why don't you throw a party?" I don't think so. I highly doubt it. Or how about this one? "No daughter of mine is ever going to live under my roof without having a purple mohawk. Now put on your mini skirt and let's go to the salon." Ain't going to happen. We'll never hear that. There may be one more. "What do I want for my birthday?" "Oh, don't you worry about that. Don't you worry about that at all. Make no big deal out of that." Now, I doubt that'll happen. I think that might be said. Because dads like presents, we like, you know, Father's Day stuff, and we like birthday stuff, sure. But dads are interesting creatures, and we are known to make overblown statements about our children, you know, and maybe this has come out of your mouth. When your child was born, and you stick your little finger down in there, and that little son or daughter of yours, well, in this case, daughter of yours, just grabbed a hold of your finger, and you said, oh, she's going to be an all-star pitcher. I just feel the strength in that hand. Just know it. Oh, one day, you betcha. Or you look into her eyes, and you see the clarity, the brightness right there in her eyes, and you say, yep, one day she's going to be the first female president of the United States of America. I see it right now already. You see, and I can imagine that Lamech, Noah's father, had these great aspirations for Noah too. Notice what he says about his son here in Genesis chapter 5. He named him, that's Lamech, he named him Noah and said, he will comfort us in the labor and painful toil of our hands, caused by the ground the Lord has cursed. Notice that the ground is cursed. We know, as Bible readers, we know that the ground was cursed. We know that Adam and Eve sinned in the Garden of Eden, and that they had turned their backs on God. They had said no to the will of God, and they had listened to the tempter. They had given into temptation, and it wasn't without results. And one of the results of that, the fall of mankind, is that the ground of the earth was cursed. So, through hard labor, we will plant and reap a harvest. But it looks like Lamech had some great plans for his son Noah. Noah, you're going to take care of us. Noah, you're going to provide for us. If Lamech had only known what God had in mind for Noah, if he had only known that Noah truly would provide for his family. Noah, when you look at his life, and you know that he barely got a day's rest in all his life. And yet, it was through Noah that the human race was saved from the ultimate curse of total annihilation. You see, Noah came along at just the right time in history. Not an easy time, mind you, but the right time. Why? Why was the right time? Because God saw that man's heart was only evil all the time. Man's heart was full of sin, was only evil. The moral fabric of civilization had been deteriorating for generations. For generations. Ever since the very beginning, ever since Adam and Eve, sin had been taking over. People had been turning their backs on God. Genesis chapter 6 says it like this, beginning in verse 5. The Lord saw how great man's wickedness on the earth had become. And listen to this. And that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart, every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time. Only evil. Every inclination. Only evil all the time. The Lord was grieved that he had made man on the earth, and his heart was filled with pain. Every inclination of the thoughts of the heart. Can you... Wow, my heart thinks, my heart has thoughts. Yes, we are impressed. This is the center of our emotion. This is where God lives. This is the throne that God sits upon. Should we invite Christ in? This is the throne that we sit on as we live a life of sin. The heart is filled with evil. Can you imagine that kind of a world? A 24/7 sin emporium. Sin running wild, running rampant. Every form of evil and sin everywhere, all the time. certainly a natural result of I want it my way, I'm going to do it my way, I'm just going to do my own kind of thing. A world void of kindness, humility, love, honesty and truth, self-restraint and mercy, certainly clearly paints a picture of hell on earth, doesn't it? The people who were created in God's image for a right relationship with God had rejected God's ways. They wanted it their way, and they wanted it now, and they didn't want it any other way. Some say that we're living in that kind of a world today. A world in which everyone just pursues their own happiness with no regard and no care or concern about anyone else. What kind of happiness do we seek today? What kind of things do we find ourselves pursuing? What kind of aspirations did they have in the days of Noah that we certainly have today in our days? Certainly there was alcoholism. Today we find people are, pursuing things like that. We find drug use. Today we can find, drug addicts and drug use. It deteriorates our homes, our families. Drug use causes, today we know that, causes child abuse, causes poverty today. Those caught in the web of drug use, domestic violence, poor health, and rising crime. We look for happiness in so many different places, except where true happiness is to be found. In that right relationship with God, who created us for a right relationship with Him. The people of Noah's time, anyway, they spent their lives pursuing happiness with no thought to the consequences. Verse 6 here gives us an important key to understanding this passage. It says, "The Lord was grieved that He had made man on the earth, and His heart was filled with pain." His heart was filled with pain. It doesn't say that His heart was filled with indifference. Forget about them, I'm out of here. No, His heart was filled with pain. It grieved Him. We learn here that God's heart was filled with pain, not holier than thou indignation, not condemnation, not anger. The Lord's heart was filled with pain. You see, our sin, our godlessness, when we choose that path of all talk, and letting it sink those 18 inches down to our heart that would impact our life, God would have us walk it out, live it out. Let it impact our life. God didn't turn His back on us. Our pains hurt Him. Their pains hurt Him then. Our sins still pain Him, still hurt Him today. So the next time you hear someone say this, "Oh, I could never go to church. I'm such a sinner. Oh, I could never pray. God would never listen to my prayers. Oh, God could never use me. God could never forgive me. I could never be in a right relationship with God. I've done too much. I've gone too far. I'm just too evil. I'm too wicked." Tell them about this verse. Let them know that our sin grieves Him, that it pains Him, that it hurts Him, because He loves us, because we're important to Him. For God so loved the world that He gave His one and only Son, that whosoever believes in Him shall not perish but have everlasting life. God gave His one and only Son. So great is His love for you and me. God is not waiting to zap us. God is not waiting to slap our hand when He catches us with our hand in the cookie jar. No siree. God saw our evil, and He knows because of our evil that we are suffering, that we too are just making a mess of our lives. And though God could have chosen to turn his back on us, or remove himself from all of our sin, no, God chose to hurt for us. God's love for us would not allow God to distance himself from us. So why? If God loved the people so much, and we're talking about Noah, and we know that in the days of Noah that God sent a flood, why then, if God loved us so much, did he destroy the people? Because they wandered too far from God, too far away. There was no chance that they would return to God. They no longer had any inkling of any kind of a desire to turn to God, to walk with God. There was nothing there except the life of Noah and his witness and his testimony and his messages that would cause them to turn and to embrace God. On the contrary, they were walking in wickedness. They were embracing evil in their thoughts and their attitudes and their actions. There was nothing left of a God hunger in them. Oh boy, Pastor, I'm starting to wonder, maybe I'm a lot like the people in the days of Noah. I don't have a hunger in my heart, that I don't have that desire in my heart to know God and to walk with him. Pastor, I'm starting to worry about this. Am I too far gone for God to forgive and to love and to change and to lift up out of the muck and the mire of the sin and the mess that I've got myself in? Friends, if you're feeling like that, if you're worried about how God feels about you, you're not too far gone. You're not too far gone. If it's important to you how God feels about you, you're not too far gone. You're not like the people in the days of Noah. That fear is a sign that you still desire God's presence. The people of Noah's time did not have that fear. They no longer cared it. We read it says like this. So the Lord said, I will wipe mankind whom I have created. Okay, we are created by God. We did not evolve from some swamp, some tadpole. Whom I have created, I will wipe mankind from the face of the earth, men and animals and creatures that move along the ground and birds of the air, for I am grieved that I have made them. Now breathe a sigh of relief and be thankful to Noah for these two words, but Noah. But Noah. I've just titled the message today, But Noah. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Only one man in all of creation could be found who was pleasing in God's sight. Next verse goes on to say that Noah was a righteous man. He was blameless among the people of his time, and that he walked with God. His knowledge of God wasn't just a head thing and it was all talk. No, it led him. It directed his steps. It changed the course of his actions because he led a life that was pleasing to God. Now, common wisdom says that whoever you spend time with, that will rub off on you. Tell me who you hang out with and I'll tell you what kind of person you are. Noah chose to spend time with God when everyone else in his generation turned their backs on God. What must life have been like for Noah? Surrounded every day by every form of evil, and yet he did not give in to it. I wonder how hard it was for him not to conform to the ways of the world. How hard was it for him to be a righteous man in a wicked generation? I visualize the scene of his life a little bit like the movie It's a Wonderful World. We know that movie, It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Wonderful Life. Remember when George Bailey sees this vision of how this town, his town, would have turned out if he had never been born? All the shops on Main Street would have been turned into saloons and gambling dens. All those family homes would have been just run-down shacks. All the once respectable citizens of the town are now drunkards and gamblers and brawlers and prostitutes. The people are up to their ears in evil. And they're outraged when George Bailey tries to protest. What's the matter with this guy? Can't he see that we're just having fun? What's he being such a stick in the mud for? There's a guy who wrote this about, he says this, that about Christians, that Christians are surrounded by people, that you and I today are surrounded by people that would delight in seeing us fall. They would delight in seeing us fall. And the author, he writes this. He notes some of their favorite phrases. Those that would like to see Christians fall, come on, what will it hurt? What's the big deal? There's no harm in this. Everyone else is enjoying it, is doing it. Oh, you know, one time it won't matter. Or how do you know that it's bad if you've never tried it? Friends, what if you and I were the only one in all of society who had the integrity, who walked the walk and said no to sin, had the courage to say no? Could I do that? Could you do that? There's a woman, she was interviewed by reporters. She had turned 102. So she had turned 102. It was her 102nd birthday. And they asked her, what's the greatest pleasure of surpassing the century mark? And she says this: no peer pressure. Well, if you're 102, there's no peer pressure. Amen? Can you imagine the peer pressure that had to have been exerted on Noah? You know, one of the greatest worries that we have today is the opinions of others. It's proven. It's tested. Others won't accept us if we stand out. And so as Christians, we think, well, let me hide my light under a bowl. Let me dilute the salt that I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be salt and light of this earth. Let me dilute it so it doesn't sting as much. Niceness has become our greatest goal. Friends, if you and I live like Noah lived, if we live righteous lives, we will stick out, we will stand out like a sore thumb. We will attract both admiration and scorn. Jim Elliot was a famous missionary. He was killed trying to bring the gospel to the Auca tribes deep in the heart of Peru. Before his death, Jim Elliot wrote this: Father, Heavenly Father, he's praying, God, Father, make me a crisis man. Let me not be a milepost on a single road, but a fork in that road. Make me a fork that men must turn one way or another on facing Christ in me. Friends, every one of us who claim the name of Christ, who say, I'm a Christian, I follow Jesus, every one of us who does that is to be a fork in the road. Our walk with God is to make us, will make us, should make us, is to make us uncomfortable to be around. Not when we're in the midst of other Christians, but from time to time when we are around those who don't know Christ, there are just some things certainly that will make others uncomfortable. Paul says it like this in 1 Corinthians chapter 4. He says Christians are fools for Christ's sake. He says that the world, and even Jesus says it, the world will hate you for my sake. If they hated me, they will hate you. The servant is no greater than the master. Paul says it like that in chapter 4 of 1 Corinthians. Fools for Christ's sake. Paul lost everything, turned his back on everything to be a Christ follower. And like Noah, he never had a moment's rest, and he also never had any regrets. So here's what happens. The Lord appears to Noah, and he gives Noah this message. Noah, troubles are coming. I'm going to destroy everyone on earth, but you and your family, you're going to be the only ones that I will save. And here's the plan. You are going to make yourself an ark. And here are the exact specifications. You can imagine just how closely Noah must be listening now. Do you think he could afford to miss even one detail? And then God said this, after I destroy everyone on earth, I'm going to make a covenant with you, Noah. You and your family, you're to bring, 2 of every kind of animal onto the ark. And one of these days, when the rains come, you'll understand why I'm saying to you what I'm saying. And so the Bible says this in Genesis chapter 6, verse 22. Noah did everything just as the Lord commanded him. Noah did everything just as the Lord commanded him. Noah's love for God is shown in his obedience to God. All right? Your love for God likewise will be shown in your obedience to God. Jesus said it like this in John chapter 14, verse 15. If you love me, you will obey what I command. Now, I know we don't like that word command nowadays, and we don't like to use the word obey. It has kind of a negative connotation. But listen, I can only say personally, I know what it was like. Many of us here today, it's part of our own story. We know what it was like to obey our own desires, to obey our own commandments, to walk in our own ways. We make a mess. I made a mess. A lot of pain involved in that. A lot of scarring involved in a life like that. So when we walk and we listen and we obey the commandments of Jesus, believe me, He loves us with a never-ending love. Noah never questioned, never argued, never delayed, never made excuses. He obeyed. Nelson Mandela wrote a book. In his book, Long Walk to Freedom, he says this: faith is not belief without proof, but trust. Okay, this is faith. Faith is trust without reservation. And you see, this is the turning point in Noah's life. His neighbors may have mocked Noah for having belief without proof, but they were wrong. What Noah had was trust without reservation. First time we read about Noah's age, chapter 5, he was 500. When he entered the ark, it was 600 somewhere. Between his 500th and 600th birthday, he was building an ark, and that ark was a testimony that God was about to do something. Turn around, please. Open your hearts to God. Trust Him. Believe in Him. Trust Him without reservation. Well, they didn't. We know the story. For 40 days and 40 nights, the rains came down, the water rose, and I wonder what Noah was thinking when he watched what was going on. And when the rains finally stopped, we read, Noah sent out a raven. It never came back. Sent out a dove. Came back. Noah waited. He continued to wait. He had a PhD in waiting, that Noah did. Yes, sirree. He sent out another. He sent out a dove. He sent it out again. And it returned this time with an olive leaf in its mouth. What do we know about olives? They grow at low altitudes. It was a sign that the waters had gone down. We read that the ark rested, it landed, it set on Mount Ararat. And Noah and his family emerged. They left this ark into a new world. A new world, a world that they were now in charge of beginning. And what was the first thing that Noah did when he climbed out of that ark? He built an altar of thanksgiving to the Lord. Noah's first reaction after this time of storm, of trial, of difficulties, these years of certainly mockery, peer pressure, temptation to conform to the ways of the world, what did he do? His first thing was to sacrifice an offering of thanksgiving. And in response to Noah's sacrifice, his offering, God made a covenant with him, and He promised to never destroy mankind again by a flood. And He said, this is the covenant I'm making with you. This is the promise I make. I won't destroy the world like this anymore. And to prove it to you, and as a reminder to you, I will put a rainbow in the sky as a reminder of our covenant. Now I wonder if you and I, if we could choose someone to start the world over with, who would we choose? What kind of person, what kind of family would that be? Would we maybe pick the smartest man in the world? Einstein? Would we maybe pick the strongest man in the world? Arnold Schwarzenegger? Would we maybe pick the funniest man in the world? Robin Williams? I don't know. But notice that Noah had none of these characteristics. No indication of any of these things in his life. But what we do know about him is that he walked with God. He lived a life of faith. He did what God commanded him. In fact, Noah is the first person in the Bible called righteous, in a right relationship with God. So in a world, I want to close with this, in a world where people still choose to turn their backs on God, Noah chose to live for God. And friends, that choice is still ours to make today. So what path are you on? What road have you chosen? Is it all about talk? Or are you walking in faith with the Lord? Should we bow our heads for a word of prayer?